So if you're like me, occasionally you get onto Twitter, and I know it's self-harm. That's what it comes down to. If you're like me, you occasionally get onto Twitter, and Twitter will have some dumb shit on it. The last week, we've been undergoing some discourse. I think the last week, it feels like it's been a week, where we have been talking about gender dysphoria. And is it real? And holy God, this has been such a frustrating thing to say. I have some takes on this, and I don't want to go into all of the nitty-gritty of everything. I just want to talk about what happened. So let's look at it. We're going to pull up the tweet real quick. So Abigail Thorne, otherwise known as PhilosophyTube, a creator on this platform. I generally quite like Abigail. I think she does good work for the most part. I don't agree with everything that she says, but I think generally speaking, Abigail is good. Her coming out video was integral in me solidifying my thoughts around my feelings when I was deciding to come out to people. So I have a pretty good opinion of Abigail generally speaking. But she made some takes. This was the tweet that I saw, and you will notice that there is a very specific person on screen. I'm going to get into that. Don't get ahead. But Abigail said this in response to an article by BMJ, probably because gender dysphoria was made up based on unreliable data by a bunch of cis doctors, multiple of whom has since been disgraced. We shouldn't need some cis person's fantasy diagnosis to transition. The fact that we want to is enough. This person says, girl, what are you talking about? People are definitely feeling dysphoric, which Abigail says, oh, for sure. And combustible bodies definitely release phlogiston. Otherwise, how can we explain the loss of mass? Now, I want to explain why I did not like this take. I'm not actually going to go into the diagnostic stuff. I know that in their stream, and Poppy already went over that. I'm going to talk about this more from the perspective of the construct of the diagnosis itself, rather than from the actual like medical side of things. My take on this is that this kind of misses the point. And it's part of this trend that I've been seeing lately online with regards to a lot of discourse talking about different ways that systems interact with us. So let's get into this a minute. All right? What PhilosophyTube is essentially arguing here, the end goal, I think, that she wants, is to make it easier to access transition-related care. And her basic point is that you shouldn't need a gender dysphoria diagnosis to get transition-related care. This is something that, generally speaking, I agree with. I want that to be clear right out the gate. And I also want to be clear, because I know this is going to be brought up, there were some people on here, on Twitter, I don't have the tweets on me, but there were some people on Twitter who saw this take and got real mad and started misgendering and dead-naming Abigail. And to be clear, absolutely fuck those people. The problem here is I think that PhilosophyTube is kind of missing the point and kind of playing a bit of a word game. Because this kind of ignores why the construct of diagnoses even exist to begin with. Because it is describing a phenomena. To say that gender dysphoria doesn't exist is honestly kind of insulting, I think. It really does ignore the actual, like, experiences of people, especially with the way that she put it. And I do want to, I'm going to look at the video, her talking about this so that I can kind of explain that. But it does feel a little bit insulting to say that gender dysphoria doesn't exist. And I know that Abigail's point here is that gender dysphoria is a culmination of a bunch of other things that we are applying a category to, and it otherizes trans people. And to be fair, she's not technically wrong in some ways. The issue is that the way that these feelings manifest, the way that specific stuff that we're talking about with regards to gender dysphoria, the way that it manifests for trans people is often different in scope and in scale than the way that it manifests for cis people or for people who aren't experiencing gender dysphoria. Because Abigail in her video said, essentially, she may have said this directly, but we'll watch it in a second, that like gender dysphoria doesn't exist. People might feel sad, but they're not experiencing gender dysphoria. And I kind of dispute that. Even just from my own experience, I wouldn't describe what I go through as just feeling sad. It is way deeper than that. It is way more existential than that. Yeah, Fesh, people were calling her a transgender, and I'm going to get into that one too, because you saw the name that was on the screen. Also, yeah, let's just go ahead and get this out of the way. The screenshot that I'm looking at here is from Destiny, who has been a piece of shit. If you really believe this, you're saying that all forms of gender-affirming surgeries are essentially just cosmetic in nature, done just for fun. Essentially, pretty sad day when one of the largest trans creators online outs themselves as a transgender. Shut the fuck up. Get the fuck out of here, Destiny. Shut the fuck up. The transgender thing is, like, this is unironic transphobia. I'm sorry. Shut the fuck up. Get out. The reason I have this tweet is because Brianna Wu. We're going to talk about that in a minute, because people are mad at Brianna Wu too, and I'm going to talk about it. So this was the video that I was referring to. This is from Brianna Wu's tweet. She deleted the original version of this, and I didn't get a screenshot, so I'm not even going to address the overall context here, but I do want to look at this particular clip.
Enoch Ethereal says, I feel like you mocked gender dysphoria even though some people really do have it. Actually, my contention is that no one does. My contention is that, in fact, no one has gender dysphoria because it's a category error. So, certainly my intent was not to mock. And I'm certainly... I'm going to say I'm sorry if you felt that way. That's not a good apology, is it? I certainly did not intend to mock. But my contention is that no one has gender dysphoria because it does not exist. I'm, if you like, a gender dysphoria error theorist. Certainly there are people who are sad because there is a gap between what they want and what they have. I myself feel that. But I do not think that that is... I do not think that that should be called gender dysphoria in a clinical setting. I hope that helps.
Okay. So, that was PhilosophyTube's video. The clip of her talking about this after her video came out. I'm not going to be going over her video because, honestly, it's too long. I have a life. I don't want to take up the rest of my night. I want to talk about that specifically. Okay? Here's what my contention is with this. There seems to be this trend online of talking about varying different ways that systems interact with us. And we tend to notice a lot of problems with those systems, right? And I don't think PhilosophyTube is wrong in having essentially like found a problem within our medical system, that being medical gatekeeping for transition care. The issue is when people see a problem with a system, their instinct, for some reason, at least in discourse online right now, is to then say, well, there's a systemic issue, so the solution is to get rid of the system entirely. And the problem is they almost never have any alternative, they almost never have any solution outside of smash the system. When PhilosophyTube says here that gender dysphoria doesn't exist, she's ignoring why diagnoses exist. She's looking at all of the different individual parts that go into the gender dysphoria diagnosis and saying, well, gender dysphoria is all of these things. And that might be true, but the reason why our diagnostic system exists is to describe a phenomena. Medical diagnosis is hurting us and it doesn't need to exist. I disagree. I don't think you should have to have a diagnosis to get access to hormones, but I don't think the diagnosis shouldn't exist. See, because the issue here is, what I'm seeing a lot of people talk about is basically going into informed consent as our main model. And there are a lot of reasons why that doesn't really work. The problem with informed consent, first of all, is I want it to be clear here. It is less safe. It is objectively less safe. There are reasons why hormones are administered through the medical system. And a lot of people are treating this like what we should just do is just informed consent. And that's it. And I am sorry. I can't. I think informed consent is good. DIY is good. It should be an option for people, but it should not be the standard. I don't know. I just see more harm coming from the medicalization of transness than the opposite. You know what I mean? I'm just very skeptical. What I'm not talking about the medicalization of transness. That's the word game we're playing here. Gender dysphoria is not the same thing as being trans. Gender dysphoria is one element that can come from being trans. WPATH doesn't even say that you have to have gender dysphoria to be trans. To my understanding, they specifically say that you don't. Yeah, this tech gives me big tabby vibes. My main issue with what Philosophy Tube said wasn't necessarily her endpoint prescription. My issue is the way that she gets there. Doesn't seem like doctors are treating patients that way. I mean, that might be true in some cases, but that is not the baseline standard. The issue here is having to have the diagnosis in order to get access to hormones. I'm saying that you shouldn't have to have the diagnosis. But I'm not saying that the diagnosis shouldn't exist. And at some point, I will say this. I don't exactly know how we administer these medications without a diagnosis existing to begin with. I'll just be clear with you. At some point, bureaucracy does exist to some level. And unless you're arguing to just dismantle the medical system entirely, at some level, we're going to have to write something down. And I'm going to be real with you. The reason why I'm getting hormones, the reason why I'm getting surgeries is not because of just depression. I feel like depression doesn't cut it as a reason, or anxiety, or whatever other culmination of stuff. Individually, those things don't cut it. What's the point of the diagnosis if it serves for no purpose other than giving trans people access to what cis people have access to? Okay, so here is the thing. The difference is that cis people have access to those things for different reasons than we do. It's a distinction of reasons. The reason why a cis person might gain access to those hormones are for a particular medical issue, right? They're not just getting them because they want it. They're getting them for a medical reason. They still have to have a medical reason. The extra hoop of getting X diagnosis, yeah, that sucks. But at some level, there's going to be a diagnosis whether we like it or not. And there's also the thing about insurance too. My sister and I both have top dysphoria, essentially. And I don't think my sister actually wants to get breast augmentation surgery, but she could if she wanted to, and she would have less hoops to jump through than I would. But the difference is both of us went and got breast augmentation surgery done tomorrow. One of us is billing insurance and the other isn't, and it's not going to be her that's billing insurance. I will be, because I have a medical reason for doing it. To some level, we need the diagnostic criteria in order to help that. Of course, maybe the diagnosis doesn't have to be gender dysphoria, but gender dysphoria has a purpose. Not everyone experiences it the same way. What I don't want to do is fracture the diagnosis so much that people stop being able to access care or stop being able to have their insurance pay for it because they don't experience X specific thing that goes into diagnosis. Well, that's fine, Myra Ostro, but you kind of have to show that it's going to help more people. My prescription here isn't that you should have to have a diagnosis. My prescription here is that in my perfect world, I would see a medical system that would allow anyone to access this stuff. They wouldn't necessarily need a gender dysphoria diagnosis to access it, but it would help. I'm not advocating for gatekeeping medicalization. You're actually placing the wrong burden here because the medical system as it exists is what we're working with. If you want to change the system, you have to justify that change. I don't have to justify the system as it exists because the system as it exists. We already know how it works. And I'm advocating for a change to that system. I don't think that you should have to have the diagnosis to get HRT. Now, what I'm trying to say is that by trying to medicalize any part of transness to a degree, it's almost implying an idea that there's a right way to be trans. I believe that there shouldn't be a medical diagnosis of gender dysphoria. Okay, so first of all, we're not medicalizing transness by acknowledging the existence of gender dysphoria. And we're also not saying there's a right way to be trans. I have literally multiple times in this segment said that I don't think you should have to have the gender dysphoria diagnosis to get HRT. I don't think there's a right or wrong way to be trans. What I'm saying here is throwing out the medical diagnosis misunderstands why the diagnosis exists to begin with, why diagnostic criteria as a construct exists to begin with. And there are also ramifications to doing so that haven't been carefully considered. If you want to change the system, that's fine, but it's fine for me to ask how and show me how it helps. I'm not talking about what you're saying, I'm talking about the system you're supporting. I just see no good coming from this when all it's been used historically is as a bludgeon against us. Can you explain what you mean by that? Because the system that I'm supporting is just the medical system. Are you advocating against the medical system? Or are you advocating against a part of it? Because what I'm saying here isn't that you need gender dysphoria to be trans. I've said multiple times that's not the case. I'm not even saying that you should have to have a gender dysphoria diagnosis in order to gain access to HRT. I don't think you should. I think making it easier to access this stuff is a good idea. But I don't see the utility in getting rid of the gender dysphoria diagnosis when there is already an established utility in having that diagnosis to begin with in describing that phenomena and those experiences. Not to mention the utility in allowing people access to bill insurance through the diagnosis's existence. Like, I get being frustrated about the system. I get being frustrated about the ways that the system has been, like, used against us. But you have to justify any changes to it. And you also have to justify if you want to rebuild something else, fine. But show me how. Yeah, Star Panda, you can't just throw away a system without something to take its place. This idea that we can just get rid of it, just tear it down, and then have nothing else, have no ideas on how to proceed like further than that, I'm sorry. This is what I'm talking about. This is why I didn't want to talk about the specifically like the diagnosis itself, because I don't like I'm not a medical professional. I'm not the person to ask on that. But what I can talk about is why this like trend of talking about, oh well, there's a problem with the system, so let's just smash the system and then do nothing else. Step 1, get rid of the system. Step 4, profit. That's what we're doing right now. I don't think that's particularly useful or helpful. I'm sympathetic to the position that the system is fundamentally flawed and we should do something to fix it. I'm sympathetic to the position that certain things should be reformed or dismantled and replaced. I think those are good ideas. But like you have to have a through line here. You can't just say, well, the system's flawed, so let's get rid of it, and then you know, do the cape meme. Well, I've done my job and leave. I'm saying that having the diagnosis of gender dysphoria is always going to be used against us by merely existing. Why do you keep misunderstanding my point so badly? I think we can identify the thing that people are feeling without it being called gender dysphoria or have it be described in the way that it is now. Okay, but here's the issue. At a point, that is a regress, like an argument that can infinitely regress. If we don't call it gender dysphoria, we will call it something else. And then that diagnosis will, by your argument, be used in the exact same way. And to your point, I'm not misunderstanding anything. I understand the argument, I just disagree with you. I think there is utility in gender dysphoria as a diagnosis. Because to some level, I do think that the feelings, the underlying like issues that people who experience gender dysphoria experience, I think it manifests differently than typical manifestations of it, than the manifestations that would in cis people. I've accepted the argument that like if like a cis man has like issues with like his hairline or something, that is to some degree like a form of gender dysphoria, but I don't think it's exactly the same thing. It's not inherent. Yeah, like Aztec said, it's not inherently attached to transness, but it doesn't have to be used against. It's not inherently attached, but there are ways that like it manifests differently. The experiences that I have with regards to my dysphoria are different than my experiences with regards to like like other forms of depression or anxiety or other forms of distress. They're not the same feelings. I think there's utility in marking that distinction. There are arguments that body dysmorphia and gender dysphoria manifest differently too. Yeah, that's true. It's not all the same, and it's I want to like say it's like it's fluid too. Like it's hard to actually like conceive of a lot of this. I don't know how much of like my feelings around my body are body dysmorphia versus gender dysphoria. Like I haven't been able to quantify all of that. And I'm not saying that it's always perfect, but I do think that like there's utility to it even if it's not a perfect one. Like it's fine that if you disagree, like I really don't want it to seem like I think it's like a moral failing or anything like that. Like I just my thing here is if we're going to get rid of the concept entirely, then you have to explain what you're going to do following that and how it helps better. Yeah, I don't want to like take too much time with this because like I really don't care that much. I just wanted to talk about it because like I do think philosophy tube misses the point when it comes to like why the diagnostic criteria exists, like why as a concept that like social construct exists. Briefly, I do want to touch on the Brianna Wu thing too. People did get mad at Brianna Wu. Brianna Wu's response to Destiny's tweet here, the transgender one, she says, there is literally no person that medically transitioned in the 70s, 80s, 90s, or 2000s that didn't benefit from the professional guidelines developed by Harry Benjamin she is attacking. HRT needs to be carefully supervised by an endocrinologist. Brianna, I love you, but I hope you see all the open transphobes gleefully agreeing with you right now as you're supporting a statement where a cis person is literally calling a transgender person fake. Now, there's like a bit of truth to this. Fuck Destiny, by the way. Brianna says, I'm talking about the history of the Benjamins, which turned into the W Path. My position in this tweet is literally the same as President of W Path, Marcy Bowers. Okay. I do want to point something out, by the way. Initially, my take on this was that Brianna Wu's statement was kind of dumb because I read into it that she was advocating for more restrictions. But after rereading it, I don't actually see that as the case anymore. She's literally just like advocating for the current standard. She's not actually advocating for any like further restriction. The current standard being that HRT is monitored by an endocrinologist. Now, I think there were I saw that people were saying that she has some sussy takes on DIY, and if that is the case, then like obviously fuck that. But yeah, I can't really. I had this conversation like the other day. I can't really like find myself being too mad because after rereading it, I don't see she's not advocating for more restrictions. So I can't really be that upset about it. If she does advocate for other restrictions in other tweets, then that's bad, but I can't be mad at this because I just wanted to talk about this in the context of this particular interaction. Literally the only solution you brought up is just keeping things the way they are, which is fucking killing us. I guess I'm going to have to politely disagree. That's not true. I literally did say that we shouldn't have to have the diagnosis to get HRT, which is not the current system. My advocacy here is I would rather see this more accessible. I want to see this stuff covered by insurance broadly. I would like to see a better healthcare system, generally speaking, where we have more access to this stuff. I want better training on this for doctors, so that they actually know how to address this stuff. This is all stuff that would actually help, by the way. Ideally, everyone should be able to see an educated endo, but there's lack of access for trans people and education for docs. Yeah, like I would like to see more education for this so that we can actually access safer care. Like, that's not the system as it exists. I'm literally advocating for more like changes to the system to make it easier for us to access and for us to access better care. Like, it's fine for you to disagree, but like, no, I'm not advocating for keeping things the way they are. I'm just saying that I don't see the utility in getting rid of the diagnosis of gender dysphoria. But yeah, I really don't have too much else to say on this, like, other than to say, I do think that it is kind of a mistake for us to do this thing where we keep like seeing a like problem in a system and then thinking that the solution to that problem is to just get rid of the system rather than fixing the problem. Now, are there times when the system can't be like fixed where we do have to dismantle it? Yes, but you also have to have like a plan for that. You have to figure out how to address the mechanisms that system already affects. You can't just get rid of it wholesale and then do nothing else. But yeah, I don't want to continue too much on this. Like, ultimately, I don't care that much. So we'll see you in another segment. Let's cut this. Hi, thanks so much for watching. If you like this video, please consider leaving a like, comment, and subscribing to the channel. And if you want to support the channel further, consider leaving a donation at streamlabs.com/sagealexis/tip, becoming a channel member by clicking the join button, or going to patreon.com/sagealexis and becoming a patron. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.